Boeing, Boeing, Boeing. The company behind such awe-inspiring feats as landing two rockets side by side in what could best be described as science fiction hocus pocus, and of course the massive stainless steel thrust phallus in tribute to the ego of man. But wait a minute. Those kick-ass engineering marvels, those aren't the work of Boeing, are they? Nope, that's SpaceX. So if Boeing hasn't been throwing down monumental success after monumental success, what have they been doing?
US prosecutors have recommended to the Justice Department that criminal charges be brought against the airline manufacturer Boeing.
The US airline regulator has ordered the grounding of more than 170 Boeing 737 MAX 9 passenger aircraft.
Well, unless you've been living under a rock, I'm sure that you've heard two astronauts, Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore, are stranded on the International Space Station. And why have they been stranded there for 70 days? 10 times the length of their original mission window? They're stranded because their ride to the space station was the Boeing-manufactured Starliner. Starliner is on its third mission now, a boondoggle unknown date of return mission, and while this mission sounds like it's gone pretty badly, this isn't a one-off event. Each and every Starliner launch has been underwhelming, to say the least. The first Starliner launch didn't even make it to orbit.
The Starliner space capsule failed to reach the proper orbit during an unmanned test flight today.
And if it was just that it didn't make it to orbit, we could give Boeing a pass for simply working out the kinks of a difficult engineering project. But when you drill down into the reason that the first Starliner launch didn't make it to orbit, then you start to see a much broader, larger picture that represents the poor decision-making from the business wing of the Boeing enterprise. Starliner 1 didn't make it to orbit because of a timing mismatch between the mission elapsed timer and the guidance, navigation, and control system. The gist of the failure is that Starliner thought it was in a different phase of the mission than it actually was. So the thrusters on the ship fired before they were supposed to and burned up more fuel than it should have at that phase. So the equation became not enough fuel, vehicle can't make it to orbit. So why the timing mismatch, right? Surely it was some catastrophic failure that just couldn't have been predicted, right? Not exactly. Boeing executives were stressed out over the non-stop schedule slips of the Starliner program, so they opted to skip. And when I say skip, I mean just not perform the integration test between the two systems that I mentioned. And they opted to skip the test because it would have taken, get this folks, an additional 24 hours. So rather than perform a test on the timing synchronization between two mission critical systems, because it would have taken an additional delay, they said, fuck it, send it. And this cavalier business interest before engineering attitude has permeated the two Starliner missions that followed. Starliner Launch 2 was delayed multiple times. It had corrosion on components from unknown moisture sources and had to abort its first attempt at docking with the International Space Station. By all measures, any objective outside observer, you would think Starliner 1 and 2 were pretty bad examples of space missions. But after all this, some people at NASA and Boeing looked over the mission logs and said, yep, this bad boy here is ready for humans. It sounds like the bar for proving Starliner actually worked before stocking it with fresh meat was set pretty damn low. So where are we now? What's next? Fortunately, the space station isn't short on supplies. An unmanned Russian mission just docked a few days ago with 3 tons of supplies. So there's no real limiting factor here to how long the astronauts can physically sustain activity on the station. Now, obviously, when it comes to spaceflight, there's negative physiological effects from just staying in space so long. But at least this isn't an actual time-critical emergency yet. The story with Starliner itself, actually getting astronauts home, that's much, much different, right? NASA's latest time frame update said it could be as much as an additional 8 months for them to figure out a solution to get Butch and Suni home. Obviously, there is a bit of a no confidence vote in the Starliner craft itself being the vehicle to bring them home. There's no way to inspect the external components and the helium leaks and to verify that all the systems are actually going to be functional. Talk now centers around SpaceX Dragon capsule being the rescue vessel, which sounds great, right? Except for the fact that Boeing removed the autonomous flight software from Starliner, something it used to have. It used to be able to fly itself around, but for some reason they removed that capability before this particular mission. So it will now require extensive testing to try and work autonomous flight capabilities back into the capsule. And then there's, the final outstanding question is whether Starliner will be able to control itself when it undocks from the space station. If the thrusters can't be trusted to get the astronauts home safely as they are, Can they be trusted to even maneuver around the space station without hitting it? The space station has a paper-thin hull, don't forget that, and an impact with Starliner could prove catastrophic. So here we are, more questions than answers, and certainly a lingering bad taste in our mouths over how this situation has been handled by Boeing from the very start of the Starliner program. Guys, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date as this story develops. Chuck, TechBeat Today.